Hi, my name is Charmaine, and I'm here today to share with you one of my favorite paintings here in the Glenbow Historical Art Gallery. It's entitled Canoes in the Fog, and it's by British-born painter Frances Anne Hopkins. And I've chosen this painting for a couple of reasons. For one, it's probably one of Glenbow's most famous paintings. It has made its way into a few publications regarding Canada's fur trade, because it does speak to Canada's colonial past. It's also in a current grade 4 social studies textbook and often gets recognized by children when they see it here in our galleries. Like, hey, I've seen that before, I think, in my social studies. So for those two reasons, as well as it's painted by a woman. And in the context of this genre, historical painting, that is rare, especially in the late 19th century. So to give you an idea of why it's important and also why it is interesting to me, I gotta tell you a little bit about the artist involved. So Frances Anne Hopkins was born in London in 1838. She was born to an affluent family, and she had no formal art instruction herself. In fact, she was probably only taught art through tutors that came to her home. She had no outside of the home education. But she did come from a very significant art lineage. Her grandfather, William Beechey, Sir William Beechey, was a highly regarded portrait artist for the royal family in England. So much so that they gave him a knighthood because he had done so many fantastic portraits of the royal family. Her grandmother, Lady Anne, was a portrait artist as well, but on a micro scale. She did teeny tiny little portraits of family and friends. So you got Grandpa working on a large scale, Grandma working on a teeny tiny scale, but both of them highly acclaimed. Two of her uncles also went on to be famous portrait artists for nobility in England. Frances Anne's father, however, wasn't into becoming a professional artist. He became an admiral in the British Navy instead, which isn't to say he wasn't talented. He did pick up some of those DNA artistic talents. He did have to do sketches in his Admiralty record books, sketches of Canada's North, because he was instrumental in mapping some of those islands in Canada's Arctic. In fact, if you recognize the name Beechey, that might be because there is an island named after the Beechey family in Canada's Arctic. Frederick Beechey had 3 daughters. Frances Anne, the artist here, was his youngest. When Frances Anne was 17, she was invited to her sister's house. Her sister was entertaining a house guest from Canada, her brother-in-law, Edward Hopkins. Edward Hopkins had a very lucrative job in Canada. He worked for the Hudson's Bay Company as secretary to the head of the Hudson's Bay Company, at that time George Simpson. He was a young widower, undoubtedly looking for marriage. They hit it off. He proposed. He said, hey, Frances Anne, come to Canada with me, be my wife. I'm living in Montreal right now working for the HBC. Fantastic, she said. She, in Canada, had a unique opportunity. Her husband, Edward, became promoted to chief factor of a trade route for the Hudson's Bay Company, which meant that every once in a while he had to go out on these fur trade supervisual expeditions. Frances Anne asked, can I come too and gather information for my artwork? And she was actually allowed to do this. In fact, the cool secret about this painting is she's in it. She's right here. She paints herself into her major works. There's Frances Anne, right there, with the white ribbon in her hat. You can kind of see her husband, Edward, sitting next to her. He's got a corncob pipe in his mouth. And if you look really carefully, you're gonna see what looks to be a book in her lap. And that's believed to be one of her sketchbooks. She's actually likely drawing this fur trade scene in this painting. So it's a little bit recursive, and that can be a little bit fun. Including herself in this painting was her way of saying, I witnessed this. I was actually there. I didn't just hear about the fur trade from other people. I just didn't hear about it from my husband. I actually had the opportunity to go out on these multi-day expeditions. We owe Frances Anne like a huge debt of gratitude. Her rendering skills, her eye for detail, amazing. The insignias on the boats, how the boats were made, how camps were set up, what portages looked like, all witnessed and recorded by her with her expert artistic hand. This is 1869. This is the tail end of Canada's fur trade. They only stayed in Canada for about a decade, and then they returned to England when the fur trade was no longer as successful. Those beaver hats would soon become silk hats. She continued her art practice in England, doing sort of pastoral and landscape scenes, but nothing compares to the amazing adventurous works that she did here in Canada.